I never thought my life would end like this, in silence with a suitcase on my lap and my heart in pieces, traveling in the back seat of my son's car, heading to a place from which I will probably never return. They told me it was for my own good, that they needed space, that I couldn't stay at home anymore because I was too much for them. But I know what it means to be a nuisance, an extra burden, something that no longer fits, something that bothers. If it were up to me, you'd have been there months ago, Carla said from the passenger seat, without bothering to turn her head toward me. Her voice was like a stone thrown with anger, with disgust. I'm so glad you're here. If you're watching this video, please like and subscribe to my channel and tell me in the comments where you're listening to my story of revenge from, and I want to know how far it's traveled. My daughter-in-law never liked me. She never hid it. And yet, every word of hers still hurt as if it were the first time. My son Michael kept his hands firm on the steering wheel. He said nothing. His silence was even more deafening because he was my boy, the one who swore he would never leave me alone. And now he wasn't even able to hold my gaze in the rearview mirror. I just pressed my lips together. I was not going to cry, not in front of them. I wouldn't give them that victory. I caressed the rough fabric of the suitcase on my lap. That suitcase has more history than this house they bought together. That suitcase accompanied me when I crossed the country to give my children a better future. When I buried my husband, when I moved for the last time, and now it will be the silent companion of my exile. As the car drove on, the streets seemed to stretch out as if they knew the destination that awaited me. Outside, people walked normally, oblivious to my tragedy. I wondered if anyone else had gone through the same thing, if other mothers were also discarded like a plant that no longer blooms. The place has gardens, Carla added with a cold voice, and activities. It's not like we're abandoning you. That was exactly what they were doing. I swallowed the words that burned in my throat. If I spoke, I would scream, and I don't scream. I've endured too much to fall into that. I just watched as the buildings were left behind, as my neighborhood disappeared from the rearview mirror. That house where I raised my children, where I embroidered their names on the towels, where I took care of my grandchildren when they were sick. Now it was no longer mine. I no longer had a place there. 2 nights ago, I accidentally overheard Carla talking on the phone. She thought I was sleeping. She was saying she couldn't take it anymore, that I interfered with her life, that I was ruining her peace of mind, that an old woman like me had no business being in her house. She said it just like that, with those words. Michael was there. He didn't stop her. He didn't correct her. He just said, "It's decided." My son, my firstborn, the one who used to hold my hand when I had a fever. Now he was organizing my exile. They forced me to pack. They didn't even let me choose what to take. Carla opened the closet and began stuffing old clothes into the suitcase. She said I couldn't take many things. "The home doesn't have space for your junk," she muttered. She packed my wedding photo but forgot my medicine. She put in my winter shoes but left out my photo album. She glanced at me and said, "The important thing is that you're warm," as if the cold I felt was on the outside and not on the inside. My granddaughter Danielle was the only one who hugged me that night. She told me she loved me, that she didn't understand why they were doing this. Carla scolded her for getting involved in things that didn't concern her. Michael didn't say a single word. His cowardice hurt me more than anything. During the drive, Carla kept talking. She described the place as if it were a hotel, that it had a dining hall, that the caregivers were kind, that there would even be other seniors to socialize with. But every word of hers sounded hollow, empty, a bandage for a guilt she didn't even feel. "Besides, this way, you won't have to bother with the household chores," she added with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. The house, the one where I cooked for 30 years, where I washed, ironed, swept, where I cleaned up vomit and comforted crying, that house where she now reigns, while I am the intruder. At what point did everything change? Was it when I became a widow and became unnecessary, when I broke my hip and needed help getting around? Was it when I could no longer take care of my grandchildren like before, or was it simply the passage of time that made me invisible? Sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night searching for the scent of my husband, that smell of coffee and mild tobacco. It made me feel protected, but he's no longer here, and now without him, everything seems to crumble. The car turned onto a wider avenue. I recognized the road. We had been there once before when we took an old friend to the same place where they would now leave me. He cried the whole way. I comforted him. I told him he wasn't alone. How ironic. We're almost there, Carla said, looking at her watch. I hope there isn't too much traffic. We have a dinner tonight. They were in a hurry to get rid of me. I clenched my fists. I felt the suitcase tremble on my lap. I swore to myself not to fall apart. I was not going to give them the pleasure of seeing me broken. And then, just as the traffic light turned red, my phone rang. A sharp, unexpected sound. An old ringtone. My old cell phone. The one almost no one calls. Carla shot me a look of displeasure. Who's calling you now? She snapped. I didn't answer. I took out my cell phone with trembling hands. Unknown number. I hesitated and answered, hello. Silence. 1 second, 2, and then the voice. Isabel, it's me, Arthur. I know what they're doing to you. Don't say anything. Just listen. You're not alone. I'm already waiting for you. My breath caught. It was impossible. Arthur, my first love, the one I thought I had lost forever. How did he know? Why now? I'm right where they're taking you, and I'm not going to let you stay. He hung up. I didn't have time to reply. Carla was watching me suspiciously. Michael was still driving, but I was no longer the same. Something ignited inside me, something I thought was extinguished. A flame, a promise. And they still didn't know what was about to happen. Some believe that you get old all at once, that one day you just wake up and you no longer matter. But that's not how it is. Abandonment comes slowly, like a rain that begins with a single drop and ends up drowning everything. I wasn't always this stooped woman with a tired gaze and slow steps. No, I was laughter. I was fire. I was a mother who gave everything, a wife who emptied herself for love, a woman who knew how to postpone her dreams to build those of others. I was born in a small town, one of those where everyone knows each other and no one forgets. My parents were simple people. My father was a carpenter, my mother a seamstress. From them, I learned that love is shown with actions, not words. That dignity is worn like an invisible coat, that you must endure but never lose yourself. I met Arthur when I was 18. He was everything a young woman could dream of, brave, idealistic, with a smile that melted any fear. But life had other plans. My father got sick, my mother fell into despair. There was no money, no future, and Arthur wanted to travel the world. I needed to stay, and to take care of them. I chose to be a daughter before being a woman. He left. I'd stayed. Shortly after, I met Henry. He wasn't like Arthur. He was serious, hardworking, and above all, dependable. He proposed to me soon after. I can give you stability, he told me. And I accepted, not out of love, but out of peace. We had 3 children. Michael was the first. He was born in an especially cold winter. I held him in my arms and knew that everything was worth it. His crying was my engine, his life, my reason. The years passed. I became a full-time mother. I stopped painting, reading, writing my poems. I cooked, I cleaned, I cared. Every morning began before the sun. Every night ended after everyone was asleep. My back ached, but I didn't complain. I never did. Mothers don't complain. Mothers love even when no one sees them. Michael grew up fast. He was a sensitive, tender boy. He followed me around the house like a little duck. "Mommy, don't go," he would say when I went to the market. And I would promise him that I would always be there. Always. I would hold his hand to school. I would wait for him in the rain with his blue raincoat. I would sing him to sleep, patch up his scraped knees. I was his refuge, his everything. And then he started to change. Adolescence was a border. Suddenly, he didn't want my kisses anymore. He was embarrassed for me to wait for him at the door. He started talking in a dry tone, locking himself in his room, defying his father. I tried to understand him. "It's his age," Henry would say, but it hurt me because every time he pulled away, I felt like a piece of my soul was being torn off. Michael went to college, became a lawyer, the first in the family to achieve it. I was so proud. I cried on his graduation day, and he gave me a quick, hurried hug, as if so much affection bothered him, but I let it go. I always did. It was at a family gathering that he met Carla. Carla, her smile was porcelain, perfect, her gaze sharp. From the first day I noticed something about her, a kind of contempt disguised as courtesy. She spoke to me as if I were a servant. She corrected me in public. She referred to me in the third person when she talked to Michael. Your mother shouldn't have an opinion on this. Your mother always dramatizes everything. At first, Michael would defend her. He would tell me I was exaggerating, that it was just her way. But I saw more. I saw how she was evaluating me, how my presence bothered her, how she came between my son and me. Every conversation with her was a minefield. One night, as we were having dinner, Carla dropped a comment as if in passing. When we get married, we'll need the guest room for the study. The guest room was mine. It was clear she didn't want me near. And Michael just smiled. After they got married, everything accelerated. I went to live alone for a while. I still worked babysitting, but the loneliness was heavy. So when I fell down the stairs and broke my hip, Michael insisted that I move in with them. This way we can take care of you, he said. But what I found was not care. It was surveillance, criticism, conditions. Carla imposed rules. Don't enter the kitchen without asking. Don't interrupt when we have guests. Don't give the kids candy. Don't spoil them so much. You're spoiling them. I became a shadow, a nuisance in a cotton robe. Still, I kept cooking. I prepared their favorite dishes. I washed their clothes, took care of my grandchildren with love, even when Carla forbids it, because that was my instinct, to give, even if it hurt, even if no one was grateful. One day I overheard Michael arguing with Carla. She was demanding that they take me to a home, that it was time, that her life was stalled, that she couldn't keep living with an old woman who judges everything. And he didn't say no, he just asked for a little more time. The next week, he started to bring in brochures. The Meadows retirement residences, senior activities, they said. Just in case, he would say, but his eyes avoided mine. I knew he had already decided. Then Christmas came. I cooked all day. I made bread, turkey, tamales, punch. I set the table with care. I put on the sweater that my granddaughter Danielle had given me. I waited, and when they arrived, they didn't even look at me. Carla looked at the table and said, "Too much grease. This isn't healthy for the kids." Michael said nothing. That night, while they toasted, I sat alone in the kitchen and cried for the first time in years, not for what they said, but for what they didn't say, because I was no longer part of it, because I was no longer seen. And there I knew it. My place was no longer in that house. From that Christmas on, something in me began to change. Something died that night, something that had held my back straight for years, even in the worst moments. I woke up every morning feeling superfluous in the house, like an old piece of furniture no one dares to throw out of respect, but which is in the way. Carla no longer even pretended. She ignored me deliberately. If I spoke, she would get up. If I entered the living room, she would leave. She would tell the children not to spend too much time with me, not to listen to me if I told them weird stories. Weird stories. That's what she called the tales I used to invent to put them to sleep. The same ones that made Danielle laugh when she was little, the same ones that filled Michael's childhood with magic. The days became monotonous, repetitive, painful. I walked through the house like a shadow. I heard laughter behind closed doors, footsteps that stopped when I passed by. My hands kept cooking, cleaning, looking after the grandchildren when Carla went to the gym or to lunch with her friends. But it was as if I didn't exist. Sometimes I caught myself wishing I would get sick just so they would have to look at me, so they would be forced to see me. But life didn't even grant me that best. My body, although tired, kept holding on. My thoughts, on the other hand, began to turn darker. One day, Carla organized an important dinner. Some of Michael's business partners were coming. She asked me in her icy tone to please stay in my room. "It's not personal, Isabel. It's just that they are important people and we need everything to look professional." Professional, as if my presence tarnished their catalog house. I locked myself in my room, of course, like a punished child. I listened to the laughter from behind the door, the toasts, the quick footsteps, and I was all alone with my floral robe and a cup of cold tea. That night I wrote in my notebook. I hadn't done it in a long time. "I'm becoming invisible," I wrote. "Every day I see myself less in their eyes. Every word they don't say to me erases me a little more." Carla started to leave clues. She left brochures in the kitchen with names of residences. Recreational activities for seniors, they said. One day she even brought an empty cardboard box and left it in my room. "For when you want to start packing, no rush," she said with a tense smile. Michael seemed absent. He no longer hugged me like before. He didn't ask me how I was feeling. He just greeted me from a distance with a hurried, "Hi, Mom," before going up to his study to work. When I tried to talk to him, he would get distracted by his phone. "We'll talk later, Mom. I have a million things going on." One afternoon, Danielle came to get her school backpack. She entered my room without warning, as she used to when she was a little girl. She hugged me without saying a word. I felt that something in her was also broken. She confessed to me that she didn't like how they were treating me, that she had heard Carla say that it was time to get rid of Grandma. She asked me not to leave, to wait for her, that she was going to do something, but I asked her not to interfere. I didn't want her to get hurt because of me. Days later, Carla announced to me without ceremony that she had already spoken with a residence. A very nice place with a garden and activities, people your age, Isabel. You could make friends, take up your hobbies again. The way she said it, as if she were doing me a favor, as if she were liberating me, but in her eyes there was relief, not compassion. Michael didn't look at me when he confirmed it. He said it was better for everyone, that I deserved to be in a place where I would be taken care of, where I would be well. He said it as if he were sending me to a spa, not a nursing home. I felt my soul sink to the floor. That night I packed, not because I wanted to, but because I understood that fighting was in vain. I sat on the bed with the open suitcase in front of me. Every garment I folded was a contained tear. I packed my favorite shawl, a couple of books, photos of my children when they still hugged me without shame, and an old notebook where I used to write my thoughts. I had forgotten about it. It was at the bottom of the drawer. I opened it, and there it was. A letter from Danielle written in crayons when she was 6 years old. "Grandma, I love you to the sky and beyond." I held it against my chest and allowed myself to cry silently, as I always did. The next morning was gray. Michael offered to drive me. Carla stayed at home, said he helped me put the suitcase in the car without even a "I'm sorry." I sat in the passenger seat with my hands clasped on my knees. The trip was long, or maybe it was short, I don't remember. I just know that Michael didn't talk. His eyes were fixed on the road, and I looked at the scenery, wondering how we had gotten to this point, when I had stopped being his mom and become a nuisance. Suddenly, my phone rang. It was an unknown number. I hesitated to answer, but something in my chest told me to do it. "Grandma, it's me, Danielle. Don't go to the home. Wait for me. I need you. Don't let them take you, please." Her voice was trembling. She was crying. My heart stopped. "I'm on my way," she said, and hung up. I was paralyzed. Michael looked at me out of the corner of his eye, frowning. "Who is that?" he asked. "No one," I replied, but my mind was no longer there. Something had changed. Danielle, my granddaughter, my little girl, had called me because she needed me. We arrived at the nursing home. It was a big building with gray walls and a manicured garden. Michael parked the car, sighed, and got out. He opened the door for me and took my suitcase. "Let's go, Mom." We walked towards the entrance. My body was trembling. My feet were as heavy as lead. Every step was a goodbye, and then when we crossed the main gate, I saw her. There was Danielle, standing in front of the door with red eyes and a firm voice. "She's not going in here. She's coming with me." The silence became thick. Michael looked at her with bewilderment. "Danielle, this is none of your business." "Yes, it is," she interrupted him. "She raised me. She taught me how to read. She comforted me when you and Mom were yelling at each other. She took care of me when I had a fever. She told me stories when I couldn't sleep. She's my grandma, and I'm not going to let you lock her up as if she were a burden." I couldn't speak. I just cried in silence, as I always did. But inside something was awakening. And then I knew this wasn't over yet. I would not give up without a fight. From the moment Danielle appeared at the nursing home door, I felt a wave of mixed emotions run through my body and soul with a force I hadn't experienced in years. Her determined figure, her intense eyes, and that voice that didn't tremble when she spoke made me feel that for the first time in a long time, someone really cared about me. I wasn't the forgotten and broken old woman they thought I was, the woman who no longer had anything to contribute. Danielle arrived like an unstoppable storm, ready to break years of silence, contempt, and humiliation. Michael, my son, looked at me with that mixture of guilt and annoyance that I had already learned to interpret as disguised indifference. He tried to push Danielle away with a sharp gesture, but she didn't give an inch. The tension was palpable in the air. I didn't know if I feared the truth she was bringing more than the reaction of his wife, the implacable Carla, who was waiting in the shadows like a dark specter, ready to devour any attempt at resistance. Danielle, without fear, reminded them that I was not a burden, that I had been the woman who had raised them, who had had sleepless nights for them, who had sacrificed my dreams so that they could have theirs. The director of the home finally appeared, a woman with an impassive face with that characteristic coldness of someone who has learned to emotionally disconnect to survive in a place full of sadness and abandonment. When she saw Danielle, her expression changed slightly, as if she recognized a threat in her. But Danielle was not there to play games. In a firm voice, she requested an immediate meeting to discuss my situation. The director agreed, but made it clear that time was limited and that she would not tolerate any scenes. They led us to a small, cold, depersonalized room that seemed designed to make anyone feel small and vulnerable. Danielle began to speak without pause, with a passion that you could almost touch. She told my story, my struggle, my sleepless nights taking care of Michael when he was a child, the years working without rest so that no one in the family went hungry or in need, the times when I put their needs before my own. She described how, despite everything, I never received more than indifference and contempt in my last years. As I listened to Danielle's words, I felt something inside me awaken. It was as if a faint light turned on in the middle of a darkness that I thought was eternal. I was not alone. Someone believed in me. Someone was willing to fight for my dignity. The director and the staff of the home did not seem prepared to face that reality. Danielle's words were a challenge to their routine of indifference and abandonment. After that meeting, Danielle took me to her best friend's house, a modest place but full of warmth and humanity, far from the cold, depersonalized walls of the home. There, for the first time in a long time, I felt that I could breathe, that I could simply be myself, without fear or shame. The friendship and affection they gave me were a balm for my wounded soul. Days, weeks passed, and with each visit from Danielle, my spirits grew. It was not only her constant presence and unconditional support, but also the hope she transmitted to me. We began to plan a different future, a future in which I could regain my autonomy, in which I would not be a nuisance, but a person with the right to decide. But the enemy was not asleep. Carla and Michael began to send messages and make calls with veiled threats, trying to get me to give in, to return to the home, to accept the destiny they had decided for me without my consent. Their words were sharp knives that sought to break me, but this time, I was no longer willing to let myself be defeated. A particularly cruel letter arrived one afternoon with words that cut more than the cold winter. Carla called me a burden, an annoyance, someone who was better off forgotten. I felt that this hatred became a wall that separated me from the family I once loved. But this time, I was not alone to face that storm. With Danielle's help, we contacted a lawyer specializing in senior rights. He explained to us that legally, they could not force me to live in a place against my will, that I had rights that they had to respect. That news was a beacon of hope in the middle of the storm. With each passing day, my spirits and my will grew. We started looking for alternatives for my life. Community programs, activities for seniors, opportunities to learn and share. I no longer wanted to be a forgotten shadow. I wanted to be a living, respected woman with a voice and the ability to make my own decisions. But the battle was difficult. Carla intensified her attacks using all her influence to manipulate Michael, who oscillated between guilt and resignation. At one point, he almost gave in, asking me to understand him, that he just wanted the best for me, but this time I didn't fall for his lies. Danielle was my rock, my strength. She reminded me every day that I deserve respect, that I was a valuable woman, that I was not a burden, but a person with a history and dignity. Her words were my armor against contempt. One day, Danielle organized a family meeting. She invited everyone, even Carla and Michael, with the intention of facing the truth and demanding respect for me. The tension was unbearable. The repressed emotions exploded in every look, in every contained sigh. When I entered the room, I saw them all there, some with tears in their eyes, others with hardened faces, but they all looked at me like a ghost from the past. With a firm voice, although broken by emotion, I began to tell my story. I talked about my years of sacrifice, my unconditional love, about the injustice and contempt I had suffered. I told them that I deserved respect, that I was not going to accept being treated as a disposable object, that my dignity was sacred. The silence that followed was heavy, uncomfortable, full of regret and truth. Some cried, others lowered their gaze, and Danielle squeezed my hand tightly, transmitting the pride and love she felt for me. For the first time in a long time, I felt that my voice was being heard, that my story had a place. That night I slept with a peace that I hadn't felt in years. I knew that the fight was not over, but now I had the strength to move forward. The dignity I thought was lost was beginning to be reborn, fueled by my granddaughter's love and by my own unshakable will. After that meeting, that seemed to open a small crack in the wall of my family's indifference. I thought that things would start to change, but reality was quick to show me that the battle I was facing was much more cruel and complicated than I imagined. The villain of this story, Carla, was not willing to give an inch. Her hatred and resentment grew every day, fueled by the need to control and manipulate everything around her. What she saw as a direct threat to her power over Michael and the family, I saw as an opportunity to defend my dignity and reclaim my life. It didn't take long for Carla to show her true intentions. First, there were constant calls to Danielle, full of insults and veiled threats. Then came the written messages with sharp words accusing us of being liars, of wanting to destabilize the family, of destroying Michael's reputation. But the most painful thing was when from the shadows she began to pull her strings to initiate a legal process against me, alleging mental incompetence and danger to myself, trying to take me back to the home, this time with court orders. It was then that I understood that the fight would not only be emotional, but also legal. Danielle and I found ourselves involved in a labyrinth of paperwork, lawyers, documents, and hearings. I felt like the world was collapsing on me, but there was something that burned inside me, a flame that refused to be extinguished. I couldn't let Carla win, not after everything I had endured. The lawyer who supported us was fundamental. His experience and knowledge were like a beacon in the midst of the darkness. He explained to us that the law was on our side, that as long as I was in a condition to express my will, no one could force me to live in a place against my wishes. But he also warned us that Carla would use all her tricks to manipulate the system and make me seem weak or incapable. The hearings were terrible. Feeling judged as if I were a rebellious girl or an incompetent old woman was humiliating. Carla was present at all of them with that bitter smile and calculating gaze, ready to destroy me. Michael, who at first seemed to be in the middle, little by little moved away, letting his wife handle everything. However, there was a decisive moment that marked a before and after. During a hearing, one of my grandchildren, Jack, unexpectedly burst in. Jack was always different, the family rebel, the one who didn't fit into the norms or the impositions of Carla and Michael. With a firm voice and eyes full of tears, he took the floor and spoke about the love and respect he felt for his grandmother. He told stories that no one else dared to remember, moments when I had been his refuge, his comfort, his inspiration. It was a testimony that moved even the judge. Carla's expression turned to one of contained anger, but she couldn't stop Jack's words from sinking in. That intervention was key for the judge to rule in my favor, recognizing my capacity and right to decide on my life. But the fight didn't end there. Carla intensified her maneuvers using emotional blackmail and manipulations to try to break my will. Michael became a divided man, trapped between loyalty to his wife and love for his mother. Sometimes he would ask me to give in, to do it for them, for the family. But this time I couldn't go back. In those dark moments, Danielle was my pillar. Her constant presence, her unconditional support, and her courage gave me the strength to continue. She reminded me every day that my dignity was worth more than any fear or pain, that I deserved to live a full life with respect. We started to plan the next stage, to regain my independence, to find a place where I could live with dignity and surrounded by affection, far from the home and contempt. I had found a group of people who offered support to seniors to live in a community with activities and respect for their autonomy. It was a real hope, but Carla was not willing to allow it. With the help of some influential acquaintances, she tried to block my plans. She had my finances reviewed, my mental health questioned, and sowed doubts in the community. It was a frontal attack on my integrity and reputation. I felt that the shadow of defeat was stalking me, but then something unexpected happened. An old friend from my youth, Richard, appeared in my life. A wise and generous man who had been a pillar in my past and now became a crucial ally. His support was unconditional. He offered me his house to live in temporarily and helped me gather evidence and testimonies that demonstrated my strength and ability. With Richard by my side, I felt strengthened. I not only had a refuge, but also a companion who believed in me and fought with me. Together, we began to build a plan to confront Carla and regain the peace that had been snatched from me. In the midst of all this, Danielle discovered that Carla had falsified documents to discredit me, an illegal action that could be decisive in the trial. With that evidence in hand, we filed a formal complaint, a strong blow that put Carla and her strategy in check. The atmosphere became more and more tense. Carla began to lose allies. Her web of lies began to crumble. Michael, confused and torn, began to question his own decisions, and I, despite the accumulated fatigue and sadness, felt a new strength, a fierce determination not to let hatred and cruelty win. Every day was a battle, but also a step towards freedom. Danielle and Richard were my shields, my light in the darkness. My family was beginning to see something more than a vulnerable old woman in me. They saw a woman who fought with courage, who refused to disappear without being heard. The transformation that had begun months ago was now becoming visible. I was not just a survivor, but a warrior. My voice, once silenced, now resonated loudly in the corridors of power and in the hearts of those who knew me. And then, when everything seemed on the verge of collapse, the final hearing arrived, a crucial moment where truth and justice would face each other. The weight of the years, of the wounds, of the struggle rested in my hands. I knew it wouldn't be easy, but I also knew that no matter what happened, I had already won something invaluable: self-respect. The day of the trial dawned with a gray, dense, and heavy sky, as if nature itself understood the importance of that moment and dressed in mourning for what was about to be decided. That sunrise was not a simple beginning. It was the border between hope and oblivion, between regained dignity and the invisible prison that others wanted to impose on me. I woke up before dawn with a tired body, but a soul ignited in a persistent flame. As I looked at myself in the mirror, I saw the image of a transformed woman, one who had gone through invisible storms and who, even so, maintained a firm gaze, although her eyes held the sadness of so many years. I remembered every wound, every imposed silence, every lie that I had had to endure, but I also remembered my struggle, the perseverance of someone who refuses to disappear. The suitcase was ready, not just with clothes, but with all my memories, my hopes, and the will to prove that I was not a burden, but a human being with the right to decide. The metallic sound of the zipper closing was like the closing of a chapter and the beginning of another, one in which I would finally have the opportunity to be heard. Upon arriving at the courthouse, the atmosphere was almost oppressive. The room was full of faces that seemed to judge me even before I spoke. I could feel Carla's presence, lurking and poisonous, with her mocking smile that intended to break me, and Michael's cold indifference that pierced me like an invisible dagger. The judge, an older man with a severe gaze, ordered the start of the hearing, and the silence became absolute, like a heavy cloak that covered every word that would be said next. Carla's lawyers deployed an arsenal of cold and calculating arguments. They painted my figure as that of an incompetent, disoriented old woman, a woman who had lost her mind, and who put not only herself but also the family at risk. Their words were knives that sought to open the wounds of my past to show me as a helpless victim, but what they really wanted was to snatch my freedom. Every phrase resonated in my ears like a cruel echo, but I stood firm with controlled breathing and a heart pounding with strength, aware that I had to respond with truth and strength. When it was my turn, I got up with the certainty that this was my most important battle. My voice trembled at first, but soon it became firm and clear. I spoke from the bottom of my soul, telling my story without adornments. With the honesty of someone who has suffered and loved with equal intensity, I narrated the years of sacrifice, the endless nights taking care of my children and grandchildren, the tears that no one saw, and that I carried in silence. I described Carla's betrayal, her lies, her manipulations, and how she had tried to separate me from my family to control my life. I spoke of my desire to live with dignity, with autonomy, to be the owner of my destiny and not to be reduced to a disposable object. Then, in the middle of that charged atmosphere, an unexpected voice emerged. Jack, my grandson, took the floor, and with a sincerity that moved everyone, he told his truth. He spoke of the happy moments we shared, of how he had seen the injustice and manipulation of Carla, and of his unconditional love for me. His testimony was a ray of light that pierced the darkness of the court, and an act of courage that seemed to awaken something dormant in the hearts of those who were listening. I saw in his eyes the reflection of renewed hope, and his support was the shield I needed to stand firm. Carla, seeing herself cornered, tried to react with desperation, but her words sounded hollow and weak. Michael, who until then had remained silent, finally broke his silence, expressing regret and his support for my right to decide on my life. That unexpected alliance gave me renewed strength. The judge called a recess to deliberate, and during those minutes I felt the tension take over the place. Outside, Richard and Danielle were waiting for me. Their gazes full of anxiety and hope were my support in the midst of the storm. When the judge returned, the silence became absolute. He began to read the ruling, and every word he said seemed to release invisible chains that had held me trapped for so long. He recognized my full capacity to make decisions, dismissed Carla's lies and manipulations, and ordered that my autonomy be respected. It was a victory that transcended the legal. It was a recognition of my humanity, of my inalienable right to live with dignity and freedom. I couldn't hold back the tears, but this time they were tears of triumph and liberation. Upon leaving the courthouse, the weight I had been carrying for years vanished for an instant. The crowd dispersed, but I felt the invisible embrace of all those who had believed in me. And however, I knew that the real battle was just beginning. Carla did not accept defeat and began to weave a web of slander, lies, and blackmail. She tried to distance me from my friends and neighbors, sowed discord and resentment, and used all the resources at her disposal to sabotage my new life. But I was no longer the fragile and alone woman they had tried to portray. With the unwavering support of Danielle and Richard, I faced every attack with patience and courage. Little by little, I rebuilt my confidence. I found the strength in myself to move forward, and I knew how to surround myself with people who valued and respected me. I immersed myself in the community and activities that filled my soul and allowed me to reconnect with life. I wrote my memoirs, a way to exorcise the ghosts of the past and give voice to my story. I met new people who taught me that old age is not a condemnation, but an opportunity to be reborn and reinvent oneself. Even unexpectedly, love came knocking on my door again in a different, deeper, and more liberating form. Every day was a test, a challenge, but also a victory. Every sunrise found me stronger, more secure, more alive. I finally arrived at the place I had always dreamed of, a community where old age was respected, where stories like mine were heard and valued. There, I closed the door of my past with a sigh of relief and hope. I had won the most important battle, that of my dignity, that of my soul. I knew that no matter what, I would never allow anyone to decide for me. The future awaited me, uncertain, but mine, to be lived with the freedom that I had fought so hard to regain. After all I had lived, the feeling of freedom was a fire that burned in my chest, a flame that no one could put out. It was not just a physical liberation from that home where they had wanted to lock me up as if I were a forgotten object or a nuisance, but a deep inner freedom that can only arise when you decide to leave behind the fear, humiliation, and sadness accumulated over so many years. It was as if a heavy chain broke and fell to the ground, resounding with a dull noise that made me tremble with emotion and disbelief. Was I really free? Could I start over? Yes, I could. But this freedom was not easy or sudden. It was the result of a long and silent battle against the shadows that had haunted me. The call I received on the way to the home, the one that interrupted the destiny they had traced for me without consulting me, was the beginning of something no one expected. When I answered, I heard the trembling and regretful voice of my son Alex, who revealed to me that after years of silence and resentment, he had decided to look for me. It was not just a call to prevent me from being institutionalized, but a genuine attempt at reconciliation, an act of courage that moved me to the core. He told me that he had realized the injustice of his actions and that he wanted to mend the damage he had caused me. It was a moment of confusion and hope, a mix of emotions that paralyzed me and filled me with questions. When I arrived at the home, I did not find the loneliness or coldness that I had imagined. Instead, I saw Alex waiting for me with eyes full of tears and the expression of someone who has learned to value what he lost too late. That unexpected and long-awaited encounter was a turning point in my life. I felt that time was rewinding and moving forward at the same time. We looked at each other without words at first, with the weight of so many years accumulated between us. But in that heavy silence, there was also the promise of a new beginning. I could see in his gaze the sincere regret and the genuine desire to rebuild what we had destroyed. The following days were a mix of reconciliation and reconstruction. Alex and I had long conversations in which we brought to light the open wounds, the painful silences, and the words that were never said. We acknowledged our faults, his mistakes, and mine. But above all, we decided not to allow the past to define us or separate us forever. It was a slow process full of tears, confessions, and forgiveness. I learned that love, although wounded, can heal if it is cared for with patience and honesty. The relationship that I thought was lost forever began to be reborn from the ashes, and with it, a new hope that pushed me to continue forward. But my story was not limited to that family reconciliation. The home that I first thought would be my prison was transformed into a place of encounter, learning, and solidarity. There, I met women and men who, like me, had been forgotten by their families, but who found a refuge and a new family in that community. I began to get actively involved, organizing activities, workshops, and support groups for those who were struggling against abandonment and loneliness. It was in that place where I discovered the strength of community and the importance of never giving up, even when everything seems lost. Over time, I decided to share my story with the world. Writing my memoirs was an act of courage and liberation. Every word written on paper was a wound that was healing, a truth that was becoming visible, and a message that I wanted others to hear. My book not only narrated the story of an abandoned and humiliated mother, but also that of a woman who had found the strength to be reborn and rebuild herself in pain. The publication was received with a mix of commotion, empathy, and admiration. Women from all over wrote to me to thank me, to tell me that my story gave them the courage to face their own battles. Fame and public recognition were not my goal, but they came as a natural consequence of sharing my truth. I participated in television shows, talks, and events where I could give a voice to those who did not have one. I became an activist for the rights of seniors, fighting against abandonment, emotional violence, and social indifference. My struggle stopped being just personal to become a movement that sought to change the perception and treatment of the elderly in our society. Meanwhile, my personal life continued to evolve. In sincere friendship and platonic love, I found a balm for the deepest wounds. I did not need a prince to rescue me, but people who accepted me with my virtues and defects, who accompanied me without conditions. I learned to love myself, to value myself, and to enjoy solitude as a sacred space where I could connect with my essence and my dreams. The inner peace I achieved was perhaps the greatest triumph of all. One of the most significant experiences was the public testimony of my granddaughter Valerie, who, during the trial in favor of my autonomy and dignity, spoke with an honesty and affection that moved everyone. Her courage to defend me, to face the cruel indifference of her mother, and advocate for me was an act of pure love that showed that change was possible. Even in the midst of the most painful family conflict, Valerie became my inseparable ally, the living hope that the family can be rebuilt from respect and empathy. Looking back, I understood that my life had been a dark and stormy journey, but also one full of light and learning. I'd gone from being an invisible and mistreated woman to a respected and admired person. Not because justice had favored me in legal terms, but because I'd regained my dignity, my voice, and my place in the world. I knew that the true triumph was not in defeating others, but in overcoming my own fears and prejudices. Finally, the phrase with which I closed my story resonated like an echo that I wanted to reach all the women who suffer in silence. Do not let anyone decide for you what you are or what you are worth. True freedom begins when you regain your voice, even if the world tries to silence you. That phrase became my mantra, my legacy, a call to resistance, to hope, and to self-love. With the serenity that time brings, I looked ahead with confidence. I knew that life was still unpredictable, that there would still be difficult moments, but I was ready because I had learned to walk in the darkness without losing faith in the light. And that, for me, was the greatest victory. I'm sitting in this old rocking chair that I inherited from my mother, a piece of furniture worn out by time and by the tears that I once shed here, in this same place where I so often felt the weight of abandonment and loneliness. The house is silent, almost empty, but inside me there is a whirlwind of memories that return again and again like ghosts that refuse to disappear. I hold on to this momentary calm because I know it is a gift after so much storm. That storm was long, dark, and sometimes seemed to have no end. Looking back, I see the young woman I was, full of dreams and hopes, who gave her whole life to her family with unconditional love. My name is Isabel. I'm 68 years old, and for decades I was a teacher, a guide, and the backbone of my home. The woman who held with her hands the lives of her children and grandchildren, believing that her sacrifice would be enough to be loved and respected. But with the passing of the years, that backbone began to crack under the weight of indifference and oblivion. I remember the sleepless nights taking care of my sick husband, while my children slept oblivious to the sacrifice I was making for them. The days preparing breakfasts, lunches, and dinners, making sure that nothing was ever missing, that everything was perfect so that the family would remain united. But the love I gave was not enough. It was not reciprocated. It was not valued. The first signs of distance were small and almost imperceptible. A look that was avoided, a message that was not answered, a silence that lingered. It was Carla, my daughter-in-law, who began to trace the definitive crack in our relationship. Her poisonous words, her controlling and manipulative attitude, her constant insinuation that I was a burden, an obstacle for the family. It was she who convinced Michael, my oldest son, that the best thing for me was a home, a place where they would supposedly take better care of me. The humiliation came slowly, like a shadow that grows without you noticing. The visits became more and more scarce, the calls disappeared, and the cold rejection of my own son pierced me like a knife. I felt invisible, a shadow in the lives of those I once loved with all my heart. I tried to resist. I held on to the hope that that emotional winter would pass, that love would shine again in our family. But one day, Carla's cruel phrase paralyzed me. My children have decided that the best thing for you is a home, Isabel. There is no longer a place for you here. It was like a sentence without the right to a defense. I, who had given my whole life, reduced to a disposable object. I remained silent. My dignity was the only thing I still had. I took my suitcase with trembling hands, leaving behind the house where my children grew up, where I built every corner with love and sacrifice. As I said goodbye to those walls, I wondered how we had gotten here. The car ride was a silent torment. The call I received at that moment was a flash of hope. The voice on the other end was Arthur's, an old friend from my youth, a man who never forgot the woman I was. He offered me an opportunity, an unexpected path to rediscover myself. When we arrived at the home, someone was waiting for me, who not only received me with respect, but who saw in me a dignified, strong person who still had a lot to offer. That place that at first seemed like a prison was transformed into a refuge where I could begin to rebuild my life. With each day, among the silent corridors and friendly voices, I discovered a new family. The friendship of other residents, the complicity with those who understood me, the opportunity to rediscover my forgotten dreams. I began to write my story, a story that became a cry for justice for many women who suffer in silence. My granddaughter Danielle was my beacon, a rebellious and sensitive young woman who fought against the prejudices of the family, defended my dignity, and gave me her unconditional love. Along with Arthur, who with patience and tenderness helped me heal the wounds of the past, we faced the dark shadow of Carla, who tried to silence me with threat and lies. But the truth, as always, found its way. The trial was a tough battle, a field where I defended my right to life, to respect, and to love. Justice was served, although not without pain and sacrifice. But beyond the legal victory, I won something much more valuable: respect, true love, and a new family built on the basis of honesty and sincere affection. Now, in this epilogue of my life, I write with an open heart. Every word is a declaration of strength and hope. I learned that freedom is not a physical place, but a state of the soul. That true family are those who choose you every day, not just blood ties, and that even if darkness surrounds us, there is always a light that guides us. I get up every morning with gratitude, aware of the path I have traveled and the legacy I want to leave. I want my story to be a beacon for all the women who still feel the cold of abandonment, a proof that human dignity is invincible and that deep down, we all deserve love, respect, and a second chance to be happy. And so, with a firm but emotional voice, I conclude this chapter of my life with a phrase that has accompanied me ever since. No matter how deep the night, the dawn always comes for those who dare to fight. This is my truth, my legacy, and my invitation to all women to never stop believing in themselves and to never give up. Did you enjoy my story? From which city are you listening? Let's meet in the comments. I'm really looking forward to hearing your thoughts. If you like the story, you can support me by sending a super thanks, which helps me continue bringing you more stories. Thank you sincerely for your kind support. On the screen, you'll find 2 more live stories that I highly recommend. There is so much more waiting for you on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next live story.